Welcome back to another episode of the Get Marketing Answers podcast. Today, we've got a real treat. Krista Mollion is in the house. I hope I got that right. Krista helps businesses launch into space. She's built an e-learning platform called From Zero to Six, where she mentors single-member entrepreneurs, creatives, coaches, freelancers, side hustlers, and independent consultants who are goal-getters and action takers to automate their income by building high-converting sales funnels for their business. That sounds fun. Some of her career accomplishments include building an 8-figure agency with zero funding, building a 7-figure consultancy with zero funding, building a 9-figure business with zero funding, and she's been working in the B2B marketing for over 22 years. She's also founder and host of the Solo MBA podcast. Krista, welcome.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me on. And I appreciate both of what you're doing with this podcast, with your business, with the show. I think that entrepreneurs need all the support that they can get. And so podcasts like these are super important to help guide people, motivate people, inspire people. So thank you for what you do.
Right on, right on. Well, I haven't met you before, but this morning, and very conveniently, you were hosting a LinkedIn Live event with one of your clients, which was phenomenal, by the way, talking about video. But before we get into a lot of the stuff you're doing, tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you got on this journey of being a coach.
So I haven't been on the coaching journey for a long time. In fact, I don't quite like the word coach. I prefer business advisor, mentor, hard ass. That's another way to call me. Because one of my clients said early on, he said, coaching with you is like a nice shot of tequila. So not everyone can handle much of tequila, because I practice radical honesty. And I really, truly believe that you deserve to reach your full potential. So that's super important for me. How I became the way I am is I realized very young that I was not going to survive in corporate America because I wanted to go fast like a Ferrari. And I realized that I was going to spend the next 10 years of my life kissing ass to try to get to the next level and then get to the next level. And I was going to have to work for mediocre people before I would get a chance to perform at my highest peak. And when I realized all the things I was going to have to do, I just thought, is there another way? Could there be another way that I can reach my full potential faster? And at that time, I saw a business opportunity. And I went and talked to 2 friends of mine, and we ended up making that a reality. And at first, it was a side hustle, and I was making sales calls on my lunch hour. And this was back when there wasn't as many cool tools for software that they have now, but at least I had Salesforce. So I was working my CRM, and I was making cold calls, and I was landing meetings. And bottom line is I was able to build with my 2 partners an 8-figure digital marketing agency doing virtual reality for big brands like Apple, HP, Google, lots of well-known Silicon Valley companies. And 100% of not 100%, 90% of our business was really local driven. And the projects that weren't local were somehow referred to from local big companies that we were working with. So we were very fortunate to land some massive clients right away. And I did that for 12 years and grew a team of 4 offices. And at the peak, we had like 120 people working for us, and loved it. It was like my baby, right? But at one point, I became kind of burnt out, and I realized I have 4 kids. Like, I'm like juggling running a business with my employees and raising my kids. And something just kind of changed in me. And I thought, I want to figure out a new way of working where I can spend more time with my kids and still make a reasonable income. And no, you're okay. Ivy, I'm on the call. So everyone, this is real life. Maybe this adds a level of authenticity.
Yeah.
Because we've got my 5-year-old here, Ivy, who's drinking a cup of water and drawing pictures for me. But this is the reality of why I came to do what I do today, is because I wanted to be more present for my kids. And I realized that running an agency was really no longer what I wanted to do. So family was becoming more and more important for me. Um, and I didn't want to lose the precious time I had with them before they grew up. And so that's why I left. And I went on a sabbatical, which turned into me coming back and quitting. And I'm not a quitter. So, I mean, I sold my shares and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I know that I want to try to do it on my own without any employees, because for a while I just thought the main thing I need is time freedom, even more important than money, because in the end of the day, you can't buy back the time of your children's childhood, the time you have with them. And not to make this really sad, but I actually lost my dad during COVID in 2020. And that really reinforced that I had made the right decision to prioritize spending time with family over hustling outside all the time. And, there's nothing wrong with the hustle, but I want to say that there's so many variations of the hustle. And also, life isn't linear. What worked for you when you were 20, like all-nighters, probably won't work for you after you get married, unless you want to get divorced, right? So you see what I'm saying? And then you hit 40, if you're lucky, and and then things shift again. And you're like, well, now what? Now I really am ready for something different. So anybody listening, I think there is no right or wrong answer, but listen to your heart and listen to your inner compass, because you don't have to follow a linear path. I give you permission at any time to change your mind, because if you're not at your top of your game and you're not giving your fullest towards what you're involved in, it's only fair to everyone involved that you move on. And that's where I was when I left my agency. I wasn't concentrated anymore. I just felt like it's not fair to the clients. It's not clear to the team and my kids too. So I was trying to do too much for too many people. And that's how I came to do what I do now, which is I built this academy from 0 to 6, and it's 6 steps to 6 figures. Because after thinking over 20 years of being an entrepreneur, how can I boil it down to this really essential steps that you cannot bypass if you want to build a 6-figure business? And it came down to basically 6 steps. So I can tell you about those steps, but I'm rambling on, but I wanted to tell you my story, how I came to doing what I do today. And today I'm a solopreneur. So I don't have any employees, although I probably will hire someone this year. But I've been able to do this because I'm very organized. I say no to a lot of things. That's another secret. And I automate my tech. I'm a really strong tech person. So everything I do is automated. So
excellent. Krista,
go ahead.
Krista, one of the things you said that I thought was really interesting when you talked about, kind of the epiphany for what was important for you, right? And you talked about, I think a lot of times when you kind of mention hustle, I think like a lot of people have different views of what that is. And when they think of hustle, they think it has to be singular focus, right? Like that it can only apply to one thing in your life. And I'm curious, when you kind of had that vision, like how did you figure out a way to strike that balance, right? Because, the reality is you are, as today proves, right? You're hustling in lots of different categories that are really important to you. And I think a lot of times people, they lose balance, maybe sometimes not even because they're not hustling, but actually they might be hustling in the wrong balance, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So how did you kind of get your head wrapped around that shift of what was the right balance for you?
So I went on a silent retreat with a bunch of hippie yogi people, and in the California, middle of California, middle of nowhere, no cell phone reception, terrible vegan food. No offense to any vegans listening, but man, I'm a steak girl. Okay. And so I was at this retreat, and every day we would meditate, we would do our yoga, we would eat our terrible, terrible food. And then we would go off and journal about certain tasks that we were given. And seriously, I went on this retreat to kind of try to get away from everything, all the noise, and like listen to what I wanted. And what it boiled down to was, what are my actual life goals? Because I don't know how much longer I have left. At any time, you should never wait too late to figure this out, right? Even if you're listening and you're only in your late 20s or 30s, I think the earlier you think this way, the better. It's like, well, what if tomorrow I found out I have 1 month to live and there's no cure? What would I do with the last 30 days of my life? And what regrets would I have not doing? Make that list. All the people who you want to forgive, tell them it's okay. Remind them that you loved them. All the things that you wished you would have done, make that list. Okay. And then let's wake up to reality that hopefully we have more than 30 days, and let's go do that list. Go out and make peace with all those people. Tell them you're sorry. Go make amends with all those people. Tell the people who you love that you love them, which is hard sometimes to tell people. It's a little bit uncomfortable. And do that bucket list. So that's number one, is the life goals, because then it's a lot easier to balance. Is this really taking me towards my life goal, away from my life goal, or completely just off course? And that's number one. And number two, knowing your values. My personal values are so solid, and I am the same person in business as in my personal life, which means my business goals align to my personal goals 1-to-1. And I think sometimes the mistake entrepreneurs make in the hustle, I'll read you your book right after I'm done with these gentlemen, okay? Love you.
Authenticity, 100%.
There. Thank you. Okay. I really want you to know that if you tell me you value your family, for example, let's take that as an example, because that's pretty typical. I don't know any person who would tell you they don't value their own family. Do you? I mean, if they're married with kids or they're in a relationship, or so people say, I value my family. Okay, so how often do you spend time with them? Like legitimately uninterrupted time? And that's a really valid example of how are you balancing your values? Because if you tell me one thing, but then you're not practicing it, then there's a misalignment. Because then you're saying, well, I'm working so hard for my family. But I'm like, okay, but if they grew up, they're kids, and they didn't get to see you, and they don't even remember a single time you were able to make it, to their game or their practice, or watch them do an activity, then what's the point, right? And so I think it's important to be honest about that, and then take it one step further and say, okay, if I'm being really honest that I want to change that, what do I have to do in my life? How can I make money, feed my family, pay my bills, but have it all, right? That's what it's about. So it's maybe not about balance as much as finding a compromise. And I call it blending, not balance. Because look what's happening now. I'm on a podcast interview, and I've got my 5-year-old here. And she keeps coming back out to show me something. But I think it's okay. I think that we have to find these compromise between all or nothing, because life should be a little bit messy, right? It should be a little bit chaotic, but you can do great things even in chaos. I closed some of my 7-figure deals on the phone while I was pushing my kids in a stroller. I mean, they're like on their nap, they're sleeping, and I'm on my headset and I'm talking to a client, and I'm like, let's do this, and let's email each other. We'll send you over the paperwork. We're starting next week. And if they would see me, I'm not in an office building. I'm like out on the sunny beach of California with my little kids in this big, big double stroller, you know? So that's real. And that's maybe not balance, but it's blending.
It's no
Absolutely.
wonder Ivy wants to get in on all these deals and these conversations. I mean, it makes sense now. I get it. You know, what's interesting about that comment, Krista, is that I was having a conversation on a podcast, was guesting recently, and someone asked me about that. Like, how do you balance everything? And I said, I don't know if there's this right way of doing that, or if balance is even the right word, because I know some people hate that. But I would say, look, I want my kids to see me working, not all the time, but I want them to see me occasionally working at night, and my wife too. And we feel that's healthy. And the reason being is that we want our kids to say, you know what, mom and dad worked really hard. And that's how we have nice things in our life. That's why we're able to afford to do things such as vacations and whatever else we might be doing. And so I also want them to have that work ethic instilled in them, because we're not the family that's going to sit around and watch Netflix every night and just congregate on the couch and do nothing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think that you have to balance your spare time and your weekends as you see fit for you. But for me personally, I want my kids to say, yeah, sometimes there's going to be weeks where you can work 50 hours a week, and then you're going to have weeks where maybe you have to take a couple half days because you're taking kids to soccer practice or you've got other stuff going on. And I think that's okay. That's me personally. As it relates to balance, how do you coach your clients on doing that? Because I can imagine most entrepreneurs they're struggling with that because they don't know really how to prioritize their time or prioritize their duties.
Oh man, you really understand, and that is the problem. That is the main problem, because they're suffering from employee mentality. Employee mentality is where someone else is calling the shots. Ultimately, they're controlling your time, they're controlling your tasks, and every day, okay, I have to be at this place, or I have to at least show up online nowadays, right? And everything is kind of regulated for you. Whereas as an entrepreneur, no one has got your back. There's no accountability. There's no one helping you prioritize things. And so what I teach is something that I learned from the Silicon Valley, where I cut my teeth as a business owner, right? And working with all these big dogs there. It's called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. OKRs are more powerful than KPIs, although KPIs are equally important. But the difference between KPIs, which more people seem to know about, is that a KPI only takes a snapshot of what's happened or what's happening. Like right now, this quarter, we have achieved these things. Whereas OKRs tell you why. And so what would you rather know? Like as if you're trying to make more money in your business, it's like, oh great, we didn't meet our goal, right? Or we exceed our, oh that's great. There's not enough data, and so we need to go deeper. We need to look into what's behind that, so that either if it was positive, we can repeat it and maybe even templatize it and create a system around repeating that, and spreading it throughout the company. Or if we failed, we'll figure out exactly the pinpoint where the problem was and fix it. So that's what I love about OKRs is there's no wiggle room. It's just like right in your face. It's like, you have to do something. It's all about taking action. And there's a great book that I recommend to your listeners. It's called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And John Doerr he became famous because he coached the two founders of Google, and he came on as a coach there when they only had a couple of employees. And both of the founders credit OKRs to their explosive growth. They're like, without that system, we wouldn't have been able to hit what we did. And it's a goal setting system, just to be clear. But obviously, when you're talking about goals, that directly leads into your time, because it's the first is like, okay, here's our goals, but how are we going to achieve them? And then how does that translate into your calendar? So with my clients, I teach them the OKR system, and then I say, hey, guess what? You're going to share your calendar with me. And they're like, but I don't want you to see all my private stuff. And I said, no, that's not what I meant. What I mean is you're going to go into, oh, you go get it. Or no, here I have some. Hold on. You're going to go into, Outlook or Google Docs. Okay, drink this and you'll be fine. I'll come take care of you. You can go into your calendar and you can set up a shared business calendar. And you can send it to me, share it with somebody, right? Just like a team member. So I'm your new team member. I'm your coach. So now I need to see every waking moment what you're doing, but not to micromanage, but to understand, are we clear about the milestones? Are we clear about the check-ins? There should be consistent accountability, meaning every Friday we have a check-in. And the check-in is to understand, how did the week go? If you're on track. And I don't need to have a call with you. I can just have a Slack conversation and look at your calendar and say, okay, did you hit your targets this week? How did things go? Are you stuck with anything? No, I'm not stuck. I know what I did wrong, and I'm going to double down on doing more next week. Or no, I am stuck and I'm highly frustrated. Okay, let's hop on a call and let me look with you so we can match up what went wrong. And so this system has worked for my clients so far.
Let's go one step further and let's talk about the funnels, because so often on your LinkedIn and a lot of the content you're creating, you talk about funnels and how you help your clients double their revenue. That is something that I think almost anybody listening can get behind. So give us some of the secret sauce as to how this works. I know we talk a lot about funnels. Most people listening know what a funnel is. So let's hear about that.
Absolutely. So I like to say, in my coaching business, there was a before and after story in that short time frame. When I first started coaching, I was mostly doing B2B consulting, coming in and helping people understand how to grow their businesses. And that was obviously an active form of income. It was well paid, but it took a lot of my time, and there was no system to generate new clients, which means I was completely dependent on referrals and cold calling. So I was using the same systems I used to grow my agency. But the difference was enormous, because in my agency, I hired a bunch of people and they did most of the work, so I didn't have to. So while I'm cold calling or I'm going and presenting, they're doing a lot of work that's being billed. Whereas now, if I'm consulting, while I'm consulting, who's doing the sales biz dev for me? Nobody, right? And so I looked at a few options. I studied a few different systems, and I realized what's really missing for me is funnels. And so I started studying everything I could about funnels. And the first where I got that in my head was Russell Brunson with ClickFunnels, and obviously funnels, he does not own funnels. For everyone listening, there's a lot more out there than whenever I say that, they immediately think of ClickFunnels. I'm like, no, I don't even use ClickFunnels, although it's a decent program. Obviously, it worked for a lot of people. But I do credit Russell Brunson for publishing 3 really good books about funnels: Expert Secrets, Traffic Secrets, and what was the other one?
.com Secrets.
Yes, that's the one, right? .com Secrets. And that really got me thinking, well, I need a system that works for a solopreneur, that's scalable, and that's also a smart financial decision, because the alternatives would be hiring a bunch of people to go out and do biz dev for me. And then I was like, no, I promised myself I wasn't going to take that route of hiring a team. I was going to try to do it myself. And so that's when I built my first funnel, and pretty quickly it took off. And I understood that I was an idiot for not putting those up from day one. And so very quickly I understood that for each of my clients, this was going to have to be a staple of what they did. But it didn't stop there. What happened next was I started looking for a funnel partner, because I was like, well, I'm a business coach. I'm not going to be dealing with funnels. And what I found a lot of people aren't teaching the full funnel cycle. So I would find people are like, I'm going to build you a sales page and a squeeze page, an opt-in page, a checkout page, and that's about it. But a good funnel has to have a lot more in it. So I found partners who can do that. There's plenty of very talented people who can build you a very nice funnel. But the way I teach funnels is much more comprehensive, and so I actually ended up building my own program, which is the 8-week Business Accelerator Funnel Bootcamp, which I run twice a year. And it's for solopreneurs who can come in they can come in when they're just starting out a business idea, because I wish I would have done it back then from day one, or they can come in like I did when you're already making quite good money as a consultant and coaching, but you realize that there's no potential for growth. You're like, I'm going to have to run ads, or I'm going to have to hire someone. What do I do to actually get new business coming in? Because we can't pay our bills just on referrals. So even if you're making nice money, I just got off a call right before this interview with a lady who her biggest client suddenly backed out. And it wasn't due to her lack of professionalism or anything. She was doing a great job. The client explained that they had decided to merge with a different company, and there was an in-house department and things would be, so they gave her notice, and it came completely as a shock. And the problem with this lady is that she doesn't have funnels. So she's been making all this good money, but now starting in 30 days from now, she's going to want to have some funnels, because now she's like, whoa, how do I replace that big client? And she has no system to do that. So I hope I answered your question about the secret sauce. It's not so secret anymore, but I don't think a lot of people are teaching it in a comprehensive step-by-step fashion as I do. Because I looked for those programs, because I would have been happy to partner with somebody who was doing it and just refer my clients there. And I couldn't find one, so I decided to build one.
So with funnels, it seems like right now the big thing that a lot of people are doing is they're hosting webinars, online virtual events of some sort, or they're podcasting, whether it's guesting or hosting. What do you see that's working for your clients right now, or what are you recommending?
Oh, that's a great question, because I'd love to shout out my my client and now somewhat partner, Chris Colt, who is the challenge champion. And so, Chris, when you listen to this, you'll be pleased to know that I think that challenges are the hottest thing right now. And the reason is that people love gamification. That's number one. So it's fun. Challenges are fun. And so that gamification component is something you don't get on a webinar, right? Who gets up and says, I want to get on a webinar today? Yeah. Right? Like nobody, right? But if you hear, oh, I'm going to go to a challenge and I'm going to learn how to build a funnel, at least, understand it, or I'm going to learn something valuable. There's a lot more motivation in challenges and then webinars. And the second thing about challenges that I love is we do 3 to 5 day challenges, and we set up a group, like a free community for the participants. And so what we do is we actually create a micro community in a very short time frame. So like maybe a week before the challenge, we have like a pre-challenge mixer, like a networking event. We ask everyone to introduce themselves. We have people like chatting in the feed. My cat's doing crazy stuff. But it's really, really cool, because by the end of the challenge, people are doing business with each other, and they're like, man, I don't want to leave this challenge. This is like, I've so it's not just like a webinar where it's just the talking head kind of thing with the slides. By the end of a good challenge, you've made new friendships. You've made new partnerships. You've met people who you probably wouldn't have met before. And I'll be like, how did you business partners meet? We met in the challenge. Isn't that crazy? So there's so many benefits of using challenges as your top of funnel tool, because no one wants to get on another webinar.
All very fair.
No offense. No offense.
No.
There's a place for webinars. I'm not saying never do a good webinar, but I definitely think that once you've gone to a challenge, you'll understand why you should be doing them. You really should.
So, Krista, one of the things is I think about, the solopreneur kind of mindset, right? You talked about kind of the shift you made in life. And how do you ever have people that are coming to you trying more in like the ideation stage, right? Where I know I want to make this shift. Maybe I want to change kind of where my focus is and maybe do my own thing, but I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what my thing is or the value that I can create for somebody. Can you talk about maybe how you might guide somebody through that to kind of figure out what their idea might be?
Yeah. So honestly, I really think that it's not a one-step process. It kind of unfolds itself. So the first thing I would do would be to interview people who know me and interview them and say, you've known me for a while now. Tell me, what do you find the best about working with me? Like, interview your colleagues. If you have a good relationship with an ex-boss, interview an ex-boss, right? People who know you really closely, your best friend, your spouse, just ask them, like, what are the qualities that you would use to describe me? And in my work, what do you think I'm particularly good at that you kind of envy me for? You're like, wow. Or you come to me for, if you know, oh, if we need that, we're going to go to Chris or Dustin, right? And make a list and then start comparing the list and be like, where are the similarities? Oh, 3 people said that you have amazing ideas. Okay, that's number 1. And then you're getting already a better picture of yourself. Now take that list and go to do a actual test on the Gallup website, the Clifton Strength Finder, and you will find your top 5 strengths. And for example, I gave that example of, you always have the best ideas. I love listening to you when I need some inspiration, because I leave and I'm like, after speaking with you, I've got like 20 new ideas that I wouldn't have had. Well, then I take the Clifton Strength Test Finder and I find out that my top strength is called activator. And an activator is somebody who you want to have on your team to get things moving. Like, you've got a bunch of good people, but they're just sitting there waiting for, direction. You want an activator on the team, right? And then there's something called the EOS system. That's by Gino Wickman. And he wrote these amazing books. The first one I read was called Traction. Was it called Traction?
Yep.
And he created this thing that's the EOS system that I find brilliant. So with that said, you take your personality and you're like, okay, I'm an activator. And then you read a book like Traction by Gino Wickman, and you say, I need to find an implementer to be my partner. Because while I'm coming up with all these great ideas, we need someone who's more grounded and practical to implement the ideas. And together, you guys are a dream team. And so that could be an entrepreneur partnership, or it could be you could go and work for somebody, or there's so many different opportunities. But think about how, if you just don't know what to do, you're like, I need to figure out what to do. Having taking that Clifton Strengths Finder test and then asking people around you, and I'm sure that it will match. I'm sure that the test results will really just reinforce what people have already told you. But I'd prefer you first ask people, and then it's like a surprise when you do take the test, because otherwise, if you took the test and then you go ask people, you're like, yeah, you're wrong. I'm not, nah.
That's awesome.
And that helps a lot. That helps a lot, because ultimately there's only 2 types of people out there. There's people who are more ideas oriented, which are the designers, the creators, like Steve Jobs. He was that type of Walt Disney, right? But then you need somebody to balance that energy who's more of a practical, let's set up a plan, let's implement things, let's manage the finances, let's manage the people. Um, that's the perfect balance in any business.
That's great.
That's awesome. I love that because I think self-awareness is a gift, whether you want that or not. But oftentimes there's always one or two nuggets in there that maybe you didn't know about yourself. And when you have that, it's amazing how you can shift the way you think, shift the way you do things. So let's stick with that subject and let's move into leadership, because so much of what we talk about and what we do with Hustle Nation is leadership and revolves around sales too. But being a marketing person myself, naturally, I'm really interested to hear your answer here. But we think of leadership different, especially around the marketing world, where creatives tend to be more introverts than they are extroverts. But I think when you're in a marketing world and you're working with clients, their leadership is key, especially if you're a solopreneur, because instead of leading a team, you are now focused solely on leading your clients. So I'd love to know your approach on how you do that. You alluded to some of that before we hopped on the show, and I really loved what you shared with us.
So I really think that being a leader means also making it clear who's in charge and who needs to be responsible of things. So we don't want to micromanage our clients, and we don't want to spoil them. So in a way, being a leader is a lot like being a parent. You have to find that balance between giving them what they need, but not giving them too much or too little. And so again, the way to do that, I practice radical honesty. So in my style, I tend to be very forthcoming. And I think I do this in my personal life as well as my business life. I have learned one important fact, though, is you need to ask permission before you do that. Like, I would never go and talk to a stranger. So you asked about leadership. So we're talking clearly about established clients, right? Not just some random person. And so there's that rapport and trust that's already established. That's super important. And once you have that personal rapport and trust and mutual respect, the greatest gift you can give another person is honesty. And honesty is very rare, unfortunately, because most people try to please their clients. This is a typical entrepreneur mistake. It's just, I'm going to work really hard and over deliver, or I'm going to throw that in for free so that they'll like me even more. And what happens is the exact opposite. The lower your rates, the more discounts you give, the less they respect you and value what you've just done for them. So it's important to establish clear boundaries and be super honest with people and say no to a lot of things. And that's what I do. That's why not everyone can actually handle that. Not everyone likes working with someone like me, because I just don't want to waste your time or my time. And I don't want to play games. I don't play politics. I'm just like, I need to tell you honestly, this is what I'm thinking. And this is what I'm seeing. So that's my
Great.
style of leadership, but I do it with a lot of love. Like I said, people know I care. So I can be just like a parent, right? I can be really, really strict, but I do it with so much love, and I balance it out with telling them why I care about them and why this matters so much to me, that they don't do something that's bad for them.
That's incredible, because a lot, people use the, kind is clear, right? And a lot of times people kind of beat around the bush because they're afraid of, telling somebody what they're really think, or the feedback that they really need, or they're surprised. Well, why don't I see it? So why don't you see it? Right. And that ability to be radically honest and just, tell people, to your point, if you have that underlying trust, and, you're not trying to attack somebody, right? You're trying to create that clarity so they can make adjustments and be the best version of themselves.
And it also sets the tone for the reciprocity, that they can do that for you. I think that it goes both ways. So I like to ask for feedback regularly. because I always am looking to be coached. And this is going to sound funny, but I think your clients can coach you sometimes better than an exterior coach. Um, but you have to ask them, and you have to set the tone that it's okay for them to be honest. You have to say, I truly want to hear your honest feedback. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to I'm not going to internalize what you're telling me. On the contrary, I sincerely want to make your experience better. And I would value your honest feedback. And I've worked this way for years. And it's funny, sometimes people just forget that you can just simply ask. And then if they're like, oh, she asked me, now I can, she's giving me permission to say what I really think. And not enough entrepreneurs do this. I'm like, have you asked the client? No, I've asked everybody. I've asked my mother-in-law, all the people in the office except the client. I'm like, why are you so afraid of the client? The client, you have to develop that rapport. And I think somebody who has made their entire business success off of this is Gary Vaynerchuk, because you see how radically honest he is with people. He's so direct. You just get this feeling like this is the guy who's not going to beat around the bush. They're not going to sugarcoat it. I can go to him and get the real truth. And that's why I think he's so popular, because I don't think that is common.
Well said. Yeah, we tend to like people and follow individuals who are brutally honest, because that's what people are looking for. Krista, let's wrap up. Final question. You mentioned earlier, and I wanted to save this toward the end, was you've got 6 steps to 6 figures. Can you tell us a little bit about what those 6 steps are?
Yes. So I really went back and forth with my business, thinking, okay, what is going to get people to the next level, right? And I boiled it down to understanding that that there are only 6 things that you really need to do. All right. So the first step is visualize. And visualize means kind of the ideation, what you were asking about earlier, is getting crystal clear on what you want and setting those goals. And when I say goal setting, you guys heard earlier that I use a system called the OKR method. So that's the step number 1, is visualize. The step number 2 is strategize. And strategize, I'm a real big strategy person. And I always tell entrepreneurs, please don't skip the strategy. They always want to jump into action. And I'm like, it's like you're jumping off a cliff or into an empty swimming pool. Like, was it Abraham Lincoln said, if I need to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend 4 hours sharpening my saw, or something like that. So I feel like you really have to spend more time strategizing on what are we going to do. And this comes from me running an agency. I have this strong project management sense of like, I see your business as a project, and I see each client as a project. And I'm like, okay, so how are we going to manage this? And this is where my mind goes into funnel mode, because I'm always asking, what's next? So you're going to get them into that service and you're going to lock them in, but then what's next? And I try to get people to strategize bigger. One of the things I teach in the strategize phase is to map out your entire year. So I don't plan month to month. That's ridiculous. I mean, I've got bills to pay. I've got dreams. I've got investments. So I plan year to year. And my year, because I'm an entrepreneur, does not begin in January. My year begins in September. Why September? Because this is like back to school, back to work. And it's really a determining hustle time for me. So people hit the ground running on September 1st. Trust me. On January 1st, they have all these like, oh, I'm going to do something, la, la, la. But it's not the right time. The right time is September 1st. And then I plan September to September. And behind me, you can't see, this is, I have a 12-month calendar. And so in September, I set up my funnels, I set up my events, and everything is scheduled for a whole year. So when I told you earlier, I don't have employees and I automate everything, it's behind me. And what's really cool about it is takes off all the stress and pressure, but also it really works. Like I rarely have many major changes. Because I'm so organized, I like planned out the year, and everything is about what's next. Like, okay, this is the time to launch this product. Then this is the time to do this. Then I'm going to partner with this. I have an affiliate launch at that time. So everything is just mapped out and it flows beautifully together because of my system. And that's what I teach my clients in the strategize phase. Then the third phase is monetize. So entrepreneurs are terrible with managing money. They, you should be shocked how messy everything is. So I really like Mike Mikhailovicz's Profit First method, where he sets up 5 bank accounts and he teaches entrepreneurs how to manage their money. So one of the things I do with my people is I bring in several coaches. So I bring in a money mindset coach who talks about undoing the poor man's mindset and helping you on an emotional level with your limiting beliefs about charging more money, earning more than your parents is a huge, huge problem for some people. It's like I'm betraying my grandfather by becoming rich because he hated rich people. We may laugh, but a lot of entrepreneurs actually feel that way deep down. Like I don't want my family to make fun of me for being rich. They have problems with being rich. So we have to clear that up before we go out and sell, don't we? Because otherwise, if we don't clear that out of the way, when I send the people out to the sales, you know what they do? Yeah, I know I was supposed to close that deal, but they didn't have the money, so I decided to give them something much less expensive. This is what happens, and it's all that money mindset. So we clear that out, and we learn how to manage the money with a real CPA who sets up those accounts and teaches you how to do that. That's step number 3. Then step number 4 is advertise, and advertise is where I teach people how to build a content strategy. So I'm a marketer, and so I teach them how I grew my LinkedIn account to over 70,000 followers organically, and how to plan a calendar and automate your content and batch produce and repurpose. And I just teach them a simple system. And if they want to hire someone afterwards to actually do some of these things for them, I also have resources for them but I want them to know what's going on so that they don't get taken advantage of later, right? By not knowing. And then what was it? Step number 6.
5.
So
What's
5.
5?
You've got me there. Step number 5 is launch. And launch is where I teach them actually my funnel system.
Okay.
And that's an 8-week program, but it's built into the 6 steps. So whoever's in my program goes through it at one point of the year. And then step number 6 is scale, because it's crazy to say this, but a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the first time ones, are afraid of success. So we talked about money mindset, but what about scaling? Here's what happens. I've got to do everything myself because no one else is competent. No one else can replace they'll never do a good enough job, right? And even though I chose to stay a solopreneur, I could hire people, I just didn't want to. I don't ever teach my people that they should not have others in some capacity working for them. So the scale mode is like, if you want to get to 7 figures, we're going to need to set up systems that scale. And the systems that got you up to the 5 to the launch won't get you to the next step. So by the time you learn my launch system, you're going to hit a high 6 figures. So we took you all the way there. So now that you've got the high 6 figures, you want to go to 7. I know, because it's addictive. I know this thing. And so I'm like, but you're not going to get there with the same system. So the last and final step, scale, is all about how to put in place new systems that are much more solid for growth. And those are the systems that I had in my 8-figure agency. So that's what I teach at the last stage. And hopefully you're still alive by then, by the sixth step. You've survived to graduate.
Krista, that was awesome. I think we'd love to have you back sometime to talk about more in depth those 6 steps. But for sake of time, everybody's got stuff to do. We really appreciate your time, and we thank you for having you on the show. Where can people find you?
I appreciate this as well. And the best place to go is from0to6.com. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn at my name, Krista Mollion.
Podcast? Are you still doing the podcast?
The podcast is being revamped right now, but once it's back up, it's the Solopreneur MBA. And the reason I call it the Solopreneur MBA is because I had to explain so many times about my From 0 to 6 Academy. And I used to say, you know how if you go in corporate America, you go and get an MBA. But if you're an entrepreneur, what do? You pay a lot of money and half of it goes to these swindler coaches that didn't really help you, or courses you never finished. And you're just trying to cobble together some strategy. So I said, my program is like the poor man's MBA. Because it will cost you a lot less than a 4-year, a 4-year college charges for an MBA. So
Great.
That's amazing. Krista, until next time, that was a blast. I love the guest appearance from Ivy. That was also great. And we'll look forward to connecting with you in another episode sometime soon. For everybody else tuning in, thank you so much for your ears. We appreciate you tuning in to another episode. We'll see you next time. Peace.